"Sign the farm back to us," my mother said, sliding the deed and a pen across my porch table. She had already called a realtor and promised my brother the property. 3 days later, he pulled into my driveway with boxes ready for my life. Why did his face go pale before he even reached the front door? Maggie found me inside the event tent with a folder open beneath my hand. The final pages were in order. The notary had checked each signature line, beyond the canvas walls. Folding chairs shifted as people settled into their seats. Someone tested the microphone. A burst of static moved through the field. Maggie stepped close and lowered her voice. "He's here, and he brought boxes." For 1 second, I forgot how to breathe. Then I looked through the opening between the 2 rows of chairs. Daniel's silver pickup had turned onto the gravel drive. 2 empty cardboard boxes stood in the truck bed beside a rolled tarp and tie-down straps. A dark suitcase rested behind the passenger seat. Beside him sat a woman holding a leather folder, the realtor. Daniel had not come to ask questions. He had come prepared to pack my life into boxes and hand the property to someone else. The truck moved another 20 feet. Then he saw the cars. More than 40 lined the field. He saw Rebecca near the signing table, the notary beside her, 2 reporters adjusting their cameras, and county officials speaking with the investment team. Then he saw the sign at the gate, Hudson Valley Lavender Company. Ownership transfer recorded. His foot hit the brake. Gravel snapped beneath the tires. People inside the tent turned toward the sound. A chair scraped against the ground. Daniel did not get out. The realtor said something. I saw her turn toward him, then toward the sign. Daniel kept both hands on the wheel. His face lost its color. People often imagine greed arriving with a threat, a lawyer, or a raised voice. My brother arrived with cardboard boxes. Perhaps that was worse. In his mind, my life had already been packed before he left Manhattan. Minutes later, my parents' car appeared behind him. My mother saw the sign first, then she saw me inside the tent. The look she gave me was not confusion. It was accusation, as though I had broken an agreement I had never made. I did not walk toward her. I did not explain. I returned to the table and placed my palm over the folder. They had given me 72 hours to surrender. I had used every one of them to protect myself. The paper beneath my hand felt smooth and cool. For a moment, it took me back to another folder, another table, and my father's voice 7 years earlier. At least there's nothing out there important enough for you to ruin. To understand why Daniel believed the farm belonged to him, you have to know what happened the day my parents bought him an apartment on the 23rd floor, while I sat at the end of the table and learned exactly what I was worth to them. 7 years earlier, that lesson began in a Manhattan restaurant with white tablecloths and polished silverware. We were there to celebrate Daniel's MBA. He wore a dark suit and spoke as if the city had already opened every door for him. Halfway through dinner, my father announced that he and my mother had bought Daniel an apartment on the 23rd floor, Upper East Side, 2 bedrooms, river view. They were also giving him money for furniture. Daniel smiled, stood, and hugged them both. He looked pleased but not surprised. That was what stayed with me. He received nearly $1 million as though it were the natural next step in his life. That morning, I had driven my mother to a medical appointment, then taken the train into the city so I would not miss dinner. I was working full-time and had put college on hold. I also helped my father organize company invoices and handled most holiday meals whenever Daniel was too busy building his career. My mother squeezed my hand beneath the table. "Your turn will come, sweetheart." Then she said I had always been stronger than Daniel, more independent, easier to trust. I did not need as much help. I believed she was praising me. Years later, I understood that strength can become a convenient excuse. Sometimes families call one child dependable because they admire her. Sometimes they call her dependable because they have decided she can survive being given less. Daniel received more because everyone believed he needed a foundation to succeed. I received less because they assumed I would manage somehow. In some families, the responsible child is not rewarded for being steady. She is charged an invisible tax. I eventually returned to college. I took evening classes, worked during the day, and finished my environmental science degree as an adult. My graduation lunch was at a small diner near campus. No champagne, no speech. Daniel did not come. He sent a message saying he had a meeting. 3 days later, my father asked me to stop by the house. He handed me a manila folder. Inside was a deed for an abandoned farm in Columbia County. The house had been empty for years. The appraisal treated the building as nearly worthless. The property tax was due soon, and every repair would be mine. I looked up. My father said, "At least there's nothing out there important enough for you to ruin." Something in me went quiet. I signed anyway. Part of me feared being called ungrateful. Another part wanted to prove him wrong. My father slid a brass key across the table. "Is there anything else I should know?" I asked. He looked at the envelope. "The tax bill is due in 6 weeks." 6 weeks. I had not even seen the house yet, and it had already started taking money from my pocket. The tax bill followed me all the way to Columbia County. I arrived near sunset. The house stood at the end of a gravel drive, gray with age. The porch sagged toward one window, was covered with plywood, and the greenhouse behind the barn had collapsed into bent metal and broken glass. Inside, the air smelled of dust, damp wood, and mice. I turned the thermostat. Nothing happened. A repairman came the next morning, examined the old furnace, and gave me a number far beyond my savings. That first night, rain tapped through the roof into a metal bucket. The pipes shuddered whenever I opened a faucet. Cold air slipped around the window frames. I heated water on the stove and slept in my coat. People often imagine that starting over begins with a brave decision. Mine began with keeping the pipes from freezing and finding another bucket for the hallway leak. Sometimes independence does not begin with courage. Sometimes it begins with handling the problem directly in front of you. On the kitchen table, beneath the tax notice, I found the appraisal my father had included. Beside the description of the house, he had written 4 words: "Adds no property value." I folded the note and placed it in my wallet, not because I wanted revenge, not yet. I kept it because I needed something to stop me from leaving during that first cold night. The next morning, I walked the property with my phone and a yellow legal pad. I photographed the roof, the damaged greenhouse, the well pump, and every broken fence post. I listed repairs, saved receipts, checked the recorded deed twice, and opened a notebook for every dollar I invested. Near the far boundary, beside an old stone wall, I found a narrow row of gray-green plants. I crushed one dry stem between my fingers. Lavender. An older neighbor stopped when she saw me. She said my late aunt had planted that row decades earlier. No one had cared for it in years, but it had survived every winter. I looked at those stubborn plants and decided not to sell. Not yet. I would learn what the soil could do. If you are still listening, please leave a comment and tell me what city or state you are listening from and what time it is there. I always like knowing who this story is keeping company and where in this moment. On my first Saturday, I carried a few baskets of vegetables to the farmer's market. I made only $43, but the woman who bought my last tomato saw the lavender picture on my phone and asked a question that changed the future of the land. The woman held my phone closer and studied the photograph of the old lavender by the stone wall. "Where is this?" I told her the farm was outside Kinderhook and that the land sat in full sun from morning until late afternoon. She introduced herself as Dr. Helen Morales from Cornell Cooperative Extension. Then she asked if she could visit. 2 days later, Helen arrived in work boots with a soil probe, a folding shovel, and 6 sample bags. She walked the property. Every 50 feet or so, she stopped, dug a narrow hole, and rubbed the soil between her fingers. She checked how quickly water drained. She studied the slope behind the house. Then she knelt beside the old lavender and examined the woody stems. "This ground is too rocky for most vegetables," she said, "but that may be exactly why the lavender survived." My father had looked at the farm and seen a tax bill. Helen looked at the same land and saw sunlight, drainage, and a crop that knew how to live in poor soil. Maybe value does not depend only on what is in front of us. Sometimes it depends on the knowledge of the person doing the looking. Helen did not promise me wealth. She explained that selling raw flowers alone would never support the farm. I would need several sources of income: dried bundles, soap and sachets, seasonal photography, small workshops, eventually, perhaps, visitors who wanted to spend an afternoon in the fields. Then she looked at me. The crop can survive here. Whether the business survives is up to you. That sentence frightened me more than any guarantee would have. That night, I listed every cost at the kitchen table: plants, drip irrigation, repairs to the well pump, liability insurance, registration fees, even the storage bins I would need to keep receipts dry. I did not have enough. Calling Maggie was harder than calling a bank. She knew how I had avoided asking anyone for help. I told her the amount. Then I explained the soil report, the test plot, and the plan. She listened without interrupting. "Do you believe you can make it work?" she asked. I looked at the repair list beside me. "I believe I can learn." She transferred the money the next morning. Before ordering a plant, I registered the farm as a limited liability company. I applied for a tax number, opened a separate bank account, and created folders for every invoice and contract. I photographed the land before each improvement and recorded every dollar I put into it. A dream becomes a business when it can survive questions, paperwork, and bad months. 3 weeks later, 240 lavender plants arrived. I planted the last one just before sunset. When the drip system began ticking water into the soil, I counted the rows twice. I had placed everything I could afford into that ground. 3 weeks later, the first heat wave arrived, and the irrigation stopped working. The heat wave settled over the farm like a heavy lid. By the third day, the soil between the rows had turned pale and hard. The drip lines gave 1 weak sputter, then stopped. When I opened the pump housing, the smell of burned metal told me what had happened. The motor was gone. Maggie came after work with garden hose, 6 buckets, and no questions. We carried water until after dark, back and forth from the house down the rows, one plant at a time. Some still died. The next morning, I sat between 2 damaged rows with dirt on my knees and counted the losses. For the first time, I wondered whether my father had been right. Maybe I had mistaken stubbornness for ability. Maybe I had poured borrowed money into ground that would never return it. Then I looked at the plants standing. I could not afford a new pump and keep my sedan, so I sold the car, bought an older pickup, and used the difference to repair the water system. At night, I kept my remote job. I answered emails from the kitchen table while the old furnace clicked and failed to start. On weekends, I weeded, pruned, and learned how to dry the first harvest. The lavender sold. Just not enough. My revenue did not cover the plants, repairs, market fees, fuel. I could not repay Maggie yet, but 12 customers asked about ordering flowers for the next wedding season. One was a photographer. She asked whether she could bring a couple to the field the following summer. She paid a deposit. It was the first money the farm earned from giving people a place to be, not just something to buy. That Thanksgiving, my father asked Daniel about work for most of dinner. He wanted to know about clients, promotions, and the market. Then he turned to me. "The place still standing?" I said it was, and called it my business. Daniel laughed. "There are families that only believe work is real when it comes with a suit, an office, and a business card." The dirt beneath my nails made them think I was playing. They did not understand that I was building an asset. A few months later, Daniel called and said a friend might buy the land. I told him I was not selling. "Suit yourself," he said. Years later, people would see purple fields and polished photographs. They would not see the dead plants, the burned motor, or the car I sold to keep water moving. Success is usually told in revenue. At the beginning, it is measured by what you are willing to give up. The next summer, the photographer posted one image of a couple standing between the young lavender rows. Local pages shared it thousands of times. The next morning, I woke to 17 booking requests. That was when I understood the farm could do more than produce something. It could become a place people wanted to enter. Those 17 booking requests changed the way I looked at the farm. I used the first deposits to buy a drying cabinet. Soon I was selling dried bundles, sachets, and gift boxes. A local soap maker produced small batches using oil from my harvest, so I did not have to do everything alone. Building a business taught me that strength did not mean carrying every burden myself. Sometimes it meant knowing which work belonged in my hands and which work should be trusted to someone else. I updated the insurance, applied for visitor permits, and created rules for photography sessions. By the third season, the farm was finally producing steady profit. I hired my first seasonal workers. Most were local women returning to work after raising children, caring for parents, or leaving difficult marriages. I gave them predictable hours, clear pay, and work they could take pride in. One evening in late June, sunlight moved across the field in long gold bands. I recorded a short video, no music, no filter, just the wind moving through the lavender. A state travel account shared it the next morning. Orders rose. Photography dates filled. A regional magazine requested an interview. People called about workshops and small wedding ceremonies. The attention felt good, but it also frightened me. Growth could damage a place as easily as neglect if it happened too quickly. Then an agricultural investment firm sent an email. They saw a strong story, tourism potential, and a founder customers trusted. I did not answer immediately. Helen told me to speak with a lawyer first. They are not just looking at the flowers, she said. They are looking at everything your name now means. 2 days later, Daniel called for the first time in months. Saw your little farm online, he said. Pretty impressive. Little farm. Even while praising me, he still needed to make it smaller. At my father's birthday dinner, Daniel looked thinner. He checked his phone beneath the table and avoided questions about work. Later, while passing the study, I heard my mother speaking quietly. The apartment is already mortgaged. What else do we have? My father paused. That farm is worth something now. My mother answered at once. She's doing well. She can start again. I stood outside the door and understood they had begun planning before asking me. When my father gave me the farm, he called it unimportant. Once I made it profitable, my mother began calling it family property. The deed had not changed. Only the number they thought they could take from me had changed. I drove home near midnight, opened the fireproof safe, and removed the original deed, company records, receipts, soil reports, contracts, and photographs. Then I scanned everything and sent copies to a lawyer. I once believed silence kept the peace. That night, I learned silence could also give me time to prepare. The next morning, my mother called, in a voice so gentle that I knew she wanted something. She did not ask how I was. She asked where I kept the deed to the farm. I did not answer her question. Why do you need to know? My mother paused, then said my father was updating the family records. Her voice was calm. I wrote the time and her words in the notebook beside my phone. The next morning, she arrived without calling. She walked past the lavender without looking at it. She did not ask about the workers or the business. She sat at the porch table and placed a folder between us, along with a pen. Inside was a quitclaim deed, transfer instructions, and a property estimate. Nearly every blank had already been filled in. Only my signature was missing. She said Daniel had a temporary financial problem. The family needed to sell the farm, settle his debt, and prevent him from losing everything. In return, they would give me $50,000 to move and start another garden. What happens if I say no? She looked surprised. You won't. You've always understood what family requires. Then she explained what they had arranged. A realtor had been contacted. An appraisal would begin as soon as I signed. Daniel would arrive at noon on Sunday, when the 72 hours ended. My parents told him I would do the right thing. They had divided my life before asking whether I would surrender it. My mother softened her voice. Honey, you've always been the strong one. Your brother can't lose everything at his age. I started with less than nothing at mine. She dismissed that with 2 words. That was different. Every hardship I survived was treated as proof that I could survive another. Every consequence Daniel faced became a family emergency. 72 hours, Laura Bennett, she said, noon on Sunday. After she left, the folder remained on the porch table. The wind lifted one corner of the unsigned deed, then let it fall. Hours later, my mother forwarded me an email from Daniel. He wrote that I had gotten lucky with a hobby and that the farm only mattered because it went viral. He said I could find a real job and start over. He could not lose his apartment or career at his age. He had already told his lender that family property would soon be transferred to him. The sentence that hurt most was near the bottom. She always gives in when mom pushes hard enough. My family did not think I was weak. They thought my endurance was an account they could withdraw from whenever Daniel needed rescuing. I photographed every page, saved the email in 3 places, and called Rebecca. They gave me 72 hours. Good, she said. That gives us 72 hours to make sure they never ask again. If you are still listening, please comment below and rate how satisfied you are with the story. Your presence tells me people are still walking beside me, and it gives me strength to continue. The next morning, Rebecca called. My family had no legal right to the farm. Then she asked, "Do you want to stop them quietly, or do you want witnesses when they find out?" Before I answered Rebecca's question, she opened the original deed and pointed to the line my parents had apparently forgotten. The property had been transferred to me without conditions. She reviewed the tax records, company papers, business account, repair invoices, and customer contracts. Then she looked at the quitclaim deed my mother had left on the porch. "This document means nothing unless you sign it willingly," she said. "Your parents gave you the property. They did not loan it to you, lease it to you, or retain control." I asked whether my father could claim he had been confused when he signed the original deed. Rebecca shook her head. The transfer had been notarized and recorded. The taxes had been in my name for years. My father had never objected until the land became valuable. Then I showed her Daniel's email. She read the part where he promised his lender that family property would soon be transferred to him. "He offered security he does not own," she said. "From now on, do not speak with them unless you take notes or have a witness." That afternoon, we met Thomas Whitaker from the investment firm. His first offer included the land, brand, customer list, and business. They wanted me to stay for 6 months as an advisor while their team took control. The money was real, so was the loss. I had spent 3 years building a place with a name, a history, and people who trusted me. I would not sell it only to watch it become another polished attraction with no memory of the first rose. Rebecca leaned toward me. "They aren't only buying lavender," she said. "They're buying the trust attached to your name." So I gave Thomas my terms. A higher price, 2 years as managing director, a fixed salary, a share of annual profits, approval over changes affecting local workers, protection for the company name, the farmhouse, and my aunt's lavender by the stone wall. Thomas listened. Then he asked for time. I once thought ownership was a piece of paper with my name on it. Rebecca taught me that ownership was also the power to say no when someone else tried to decide my future. My parents believed giving me the land entitled them to everything I later created. But a gift is not a gift if the giver can return once the roof is repaired and take back the whole house. Late that afternoon, Thomas called. "We accepted your terms." I looked through the window at the field. I asked for the transfer to be completed before noon on Sunday. The public event had already been planned. Now we added a notary, local officials, partners, reporters, and the people who had helped me. I did not need an audience to humiliate my family. I needed witnesses. The contract was ready, but before I signed, I had to prepare for something harder. I had to stand before the people who taught me to doubt myself and not let pity undo everything. The next morning, the field looked calm enough to make me doubt my own anger. The event tent stood between the lavender rows. Maggie and 2 workers arranged the chairs in 2 simple lines. Rebecca checked the signing table while the large transfer sign rested near the gate, turned inward and covered with a canvas sheet until morning. I tried on the navy suit I had bought for the ceremony. It fit well, but the woman in the mirror looked unfamiliar. Maggie adjusted the collar. You don't have to look powerful. You only have to remember that you are. I wanted to believe her. That evening, my father called. Your mother says you're being difficult. There was no apology in his voice, only tiredness, as though my refusal had become one more problem placed on his desk. I asked whether he agreed with taking the farm. He stayed quiet for several seconds, then said Daniel had no other choice. He has choices, I said. He just doesn't like the consequences. My father sighed. We gave you that land. You gave me what you believed was worthless. He warned that if Daniel lost the apartment, the family might never recover. I stood at the kitchen window and looked toward the dark field. And what happens to me if I give you the farm? He did not answer. That silence told me everything. My future had never entered the calculation. After the call, I walked between the rows. The lavender was quiet beneath the night air. Crickets moved in the grass. For a while, I remembered only the good things. My father fixing my first car in the driveway. My mother baking through Christmas Eve. Daniel standing between me and a boy who mocked me in middle school. There had been love in our family. That was why the betrayal hurt so much. People often say we should remember what our families have done for us. I agree, but memory should not become a debt with no final payment. Love loses its meaning when it is used to purchase obedience years later. I nearly called my father back. I almost offered enough money to delay Daniel's collapse. Then I opened Daniel's email again. She always gives in when Mom pushes hard enough. I set the phone face down. Before bed, the realtor sent me a message. Your brother says he'll arrive at 11:30 with boxes. He believes the property will be vacant by noon. Is that correct? I replied, no, but please come. You should see the property before you represent it. I did not sleep much. Every sound outside made me look toward the gate. The realtor came the next morning. And when Daniel's pickup turned around the bend, she was the first person to understand that he had lied to everyone. Maggie found me inside the tent 20 minutes before noon. He's here, she said, and he brought boxes. I looked through the opening between the chairs. Daniel's silver pickup rolled toward the gate. 2 large cardboard boxes stood in the bed beside a roll of packing tape, a folded tarp, and several tie-down straps. A suitcase rested behind the passenger seat. That suitcase told me more than anything else. He had not come only to remove my belongings, he expected to stay in my house. The realtor sat beside him with a leather folder across her knees. When the transfer sign came into view, Daniel hit the brake. Gravel snapped beneath the tires. He stared at the words. Hudson Valley Lavender Company. Ownership transfer recorded. His hands remained fixed on the wheel. The realtor turned toward him and asked something. He did not answer. My parents arrived moments later. My mother read the sign, stepped out, and walked straight toward me. What did you do? I protected what belongs to me. Daniel finally left the truck. His face had gone pale. Lori, what is all this? Only Maggie calls me that. He glanced at the reporters, the notary, Rebecca, and the workers seated beneath the tent. Why are these people here? The ceremony starts in 2 minutes. You're welcome to listen. At noon, Rebecca stepped to the microphone. She explained that the transfer had been completed legally and recorded before the deadline. The company was entering a new stage of expansion, and I would remain as managing director. Then Thomas spoke. He said the investment was not only for the land, it was for the brand, the products, the visitor program, and the local team that had helped build the business. When he announced the value of the agreement, my mother covered her mouth. My father looked at the ground. She did not walk away, Thomas said. She negotiated the right to lead. I signed the final management papers before the notary. At exactly noon, she pressed her seal onto the last page. No one laughed, no one pointed at my family. The only sound was the wind moving through the lavender and the soft click of cameras recording what could no longer be denied. The realtor beside Daniel quietly closed her folder. Daniel looked back at his truck, at the boxes, at the suitcase. None of them would cross my gate. My brother believed ownership began when someone entered a house and started packing. I had learned that ownership began years earlier. In work no one noticed, and in the signature I refused to give away. When it was my turn to speak, I thanked Maggie, Helen, my workers, and the women who had rebuilt their lives after 40. I never mentioned my family. This farm was never worthless, I said. It was simply waiting for someone willing to see what others had dismissed. After the guests began leaving, Daniel blocked the porch steps. You chose strangers over your own family. I looked past him at the unopened boxes. No, I chose responsibility. You were counting on me to pay for yours. Daniel followed me into the old living room. After the last guests left, my parents came in behind him. The house felt smaller with all 4 of us there. You knew I was going to lose everything, he said. I kept my voice level. I knew you wanted my property. I did not create your debt. He said I could have sold the farm and shared the money. I asked the question no one in my family had answered. When Dad gave you the apartment, did you offer to split it with me? Daniel looked away. That was different. Everyone keeps saying that. No one has ever explained how. My mother moved closer to him. She said he had made one mistake and that I still had time to rebuild elsewhere. I told her it was not one mistake. Daniel had left a stable job. He had borrowed against the apartment. He had used leverage he did not understand, then taken another loan he could not afford. After that, he promised my farm to a lender even though he had never owned it. A mistake happens once, I said. This was a series of decisions. My mother's face tightened. He's your brother. Being my brother does not make him my responsibility. My father had been silent near the window. Finally, he raised one hand. Elaine, stop. The room went still. He said. He had always believed Daniel had the business mind. Buying the apartment had felt like an investment in someone destined to build more. He had thought I lacked ambition. He gave me the farm because, in his mind, there was little left for me to damage. His voice dropped. I thought he would build something. I thought you would simply manage. Then he looked at me. I was wrong about both of you. He admitted that every time he rescued Daniel, he taught him that consequences belonged to someone else. He had used my steadiness as an excuse to give me less. My father had assigned us roles. Daniel was the one to invest in. I was the one to depend on. Both roles had harmed us. There are apologies you wait for so long that, when they arrive, they do not feel like gifts. They feel like proof that the wound was real. I needed to hear that years ago, I said, before I spent thousands of nights wondering whether you were right about me. I did not hug him. I did not say I forgave anyone. I told them they could contact me only when they were ready to take responsibility, without asking for money, offering excuses, or calling attempted theft family love. Then I asked them to leave. Maggie was waiting on the porch. He finally admitted it, I said. She pulled me into her arms. Then now you can stop carrying it alone. 6 months later, Daniel had lost the apartment. My parents sent a letter, and I had to decide whether forgiveness meant opening the door again. 6 months later, the farmhouse living room had become our office. The old walls were still there, but the roof no longer leaked. The furnace worked. The greenhouse had been rebuilt. 9 employees gathered around the long table where I once sorted bills. Our regional distribution trial had begun in several stores. If we met the sales goals, the agreement would expand. I did not buy a mansion. I did not leave the farm. I stayed. I repaid Maggie more than I had borrowed, but she refused the extra money. She accepted the original amount and a framed photograph of the first lavender row we planted together. Helen joined the board of a fund I created for women over 40 who wanted to begin again in farming or business. The grants were modest, but so had been the loan that changed my life. Daniel filed for bankruptcy. The apartment was sold, and nearly everything went toward the mortgage, fees, and debt. He moved back into my parents' house and took an operations job with a regular salary. Later, he sent me a message. He did not ask for money or ask to visit. he said I had taken nothing from him. He admitted that he had wasted the opportunities he was given, then blamed me when my work could not rescue him. I replied, "Thank you. I'm not ready to see you, but I appreciate the apology." My parents sent a letter before Thanksgiving. They admitted the favoritism. They did not blame stress, money, or Daniel. They did not ask me to come home. I kept the letter. I did not go to Thanksgiving. Forgiveness, I learned, does not require handing someone the key before trust has been rebuilt. One winter evening, snow settled across the sleeping lavender rose. Inside, the house was warm enough that I no longer needed a coat at the kitchen table. I made tea from my harvest and opened the drawer where I kept my father's old note. Adds no property value. I did not burn it or mail it back. I placed it inside a file marked before, then closed the drawer. I once believed success would make my family see me differently. What mattered more was that it taught me to stop seeing myself through their eyes. For years, I thought turning that ruined farm into a fortune would finally prove my father wrong. But sitting in that warm house, I understood the truth. I had never needed to prove my worth to him. I only needed to stop believing his judgment was mine to carry. Do you think I was right to protect the farm, even knowing my brother would lose everything? And on a scale from 1 to 10, how satisfied were you with the way this story ended? Share your answer in the comments. I read every one.